Welcome back to the deep dive. This time, you guys sent us some really compelling stuff, and it seems like a lot of you are concerned about the cost of living in America right now in 2025.
Yeah, it's really on everyone's mind.
So we've got this article, The Real Cost of Living in America in 2025. Is it driving you mad? And I have to say, the title alone really grabs you, right?
It does. It kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think our goal today is to dive into this and all of the other sources that you all sent us, try to pull out those really crucial insights and hopefully help you guys listening get a better understanding of this financial landscape that we're all navigating.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's just so much information out there. I think it can be really overwhelming.
Totally, totally. So we want to make it a bit easier for you to understand these challenges, maybe find a few of those, light bulb moments.
Right, like, aha, okay, I get it now.
Exactly. So throughout this deep dive, we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to start with this current economic climate, what's happening with inflation, housing, wages.
Right, a big three.
Then we're going to dig specifically into this housing affordability crisis, which everyone's talking about.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Then, of course, we have healthcare, the ever-increasing costs of healthcare, and then how much it costs to simply get around.
Transportation costs, yeah. They can really sneak up on you.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's food, there are utilities, and it's like every time you turn around, something else is more expensive.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It really is. And then towards the end, we also want to talk about the emotional toll of all of this, because it's not just about the numbers, right?
Absolutely. It can really weigh on you mentally.
And finally, we'll try to wrap up with some strategies that people are using to cope with these rising costs.
Hopefully we can offer some useful tips.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Okay, so let's dive in. Now, one of the first things that really stood out to me in this article, The Real Cost of Living in America in 2025, was how it starts by talking about the emotional impact of this whole situation.
Yeah, I noticed that too. They really frame it as not just an economic issue, but something that's impacting people's daily lives and their well-being in a very real way.
Right. And then it kind of sets the stage, talking about this current economic climate and how, back in late 2023, the inflation rate was hovering around 4.5%, which is, pretty significant.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people started to feel that, whether it was at the grocery store or at the gas pump, like suddenly everything felt more expensive.
Oh, for sure. It wasn't just a little jump in prices either. One of the sources we have here mentions that average home prices, like nationwide, experienced about a 10% annual jump.
Wow, 10%, that's huge.
It's massive. And that really plays into, this feeling that homeownership is just becoming increasingly out of reach for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And it's not like renting is a much better alternative, is it? I mean, those costs are going up too.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because you see this gap, right? Like average wage growth was, I think it was around 3.0% annually, but when inflation is at 4.5% and then, housing costs are jumping by 10%, wages just aren't keeping up at all.
It's like you're trying to run up a down escalator. You're putting in the effort, but you're still falling behind.
That's a great analogy. And what's even more concerning, the article points out that a lot of analysts are saying this trend, this discrepancy between wages and the cost of living, it's likely to continue into 2025.
So it's not just a temporary blip. We're talking about a longer-term issue that people really need to be prepared for.
Exactly. And I think it raises a really important question, which is how do people maintain their standard of living when these basic necessities are just becoming so much more expensive?
Yeah, it's a tough question.
It is. And it kind of brings us perfectly into this this housing affordability crisis that everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the article really emphasizes is that this isn't just a renter's issue or a homeowner's issue. This is impacting, pretty much everyone across the board.
Right. I mean, when you have housing costs that are increasing so dramatically in so many different regions, it's going to affect everyone in some way.
Yeah. It's especially pronounced in those big urban centers.
Yeah.
Where the demand for housing just far outweighs the supply of affordable housing.
So basically, even if you have a decent income, you might still struggle to find a place to live that you can afford in a city.
Exactly. And it really makes you question that whole, traditional American dream of owning a home, right? Like, is that even still a realistic goal for a lot of people right now?
It's a valid question.
It is. Now, another thing that's kind of shaking things up in the housing market is this rise of remote work, right?
Yeah, that's been a huge game changer. People aren't necessarily tied to a specific location for their jobs anymore.
Right. And so, as the article points out, you have people who are maybe leaving those expensive cities and moving to suburban areas or even rural areas they were once considered more affordable.
And then, of course, that increased demand drives up prices in those areas as well.
Exactly. So it's like, it's not as simple as just saying, oh, I'm going to move to a cheaper area, because those cheaper areas are becoming less cheap.
It creates this dilemma for people, doesn't it? Like, do you stay in the city where the jobs and the opportunities are, but where the cost of living is so high? Or do you try to find a more affordable area, but maybe with fewer job prospects?
Right. And it becomes this complex calculation, right? Like, what are you willing to sacrifice and what are you not willing to sacrifice?
And it's different for everyone. It depends on your individual circumstances, your family situation, your career goals.
Totally. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about healthcare costs. Because, oh boy, that's another area where things just seem to be, constantly going up.
It's definitely a major concern. And as the article points out, it's not just the premiums that are increasing, right? There are all these other hidden costs as well.
Totally. I mean, you have the premiums, you have those out-of-pocket expenses like copays and coinsurance, and then, of course, you have the ever-increasing price of prescription drugs.
And those out-of-pocket expenses can really add up, especially if you have a chronic condition that requires regular medical care.
Absolutely. I mean, the article talks about how some people are now facing deductibles of several $1,000s before their insurance even kicks in.
So essentially, they're uninsured for a significant portion of the year.
Yeah, and that's scary. I mean, what happens if you have an accident or get sick before you meet that deductible?
It could be financially devastating.
And then there's the issue of people delaying or even foregoing necessary medical care because they simply can't afford it.
Right, which is heartbreaking because we're talking about people's health here.
Right. And the cost of prescription drugs is another layer of complexity. You have people who are literally having to choose between filling their prescriptions and paying their rent or buying groceries.
It's an impossible choice.
It really is. And it highlights the need for some really significant changes in our healthcare system because this just isn't sustainable.
Agreed. Okay, let's shift our focus a bit to something that maybe doesn't get as much attention, but it definitely adds up: transportation costs.
Yeah, we often think about the price of gas, but that's really just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. There are all these other costs involved in owning and operating a car. You have maintenance, repairs, insurance, and then there's depreciation.
Right. And those unexpected repairs can really throw a wrench in your budget.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're already struggling to make ends meet, a sudden $500 or $1,000 car repair bill can be a major setback.
And then you have depreciation, which is basically the value of your car decreasing over time. It's not something you pay for directly, but it's a real cost nonetheless.
Right. And it's not just car owners who are feeling the pinch, right? What about people who rely on public transportation?
Yeah, the article mentions that even though there's been a push to improve public transit systems in many cities, fares are still increasing.
So you might have better service, but it's costing you more.
Exactly. And then there's the whole shift towards electric vehicles, which is great for the environment, but it also comes with its own set of costs.
Right, like the higher upfront cost of buying an electric car and the potential need to install a charging station at your home.
And even if you can afford all of that, you still have to factor in the cost of charging your car, which, depending on where you live, can be quite expensive.
So it's like no matter how you choose to get around, whether it's by car, bus, train, or even bike, transportation costs are just a significant part of the overall cost of living.
No way around it.
Okay, from transportation, let's move on to another essential expense: food. I mean, it feels like grocery prices are going up every week.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most noticeable areas where inflation is hitting people's wallets.
Right. And the article breaks down some of the factors that are contributing to this, like those supply chain disruptions that we keep hearing about.
And also, those labor shortages in the agricultural and transportation sectors are leading to higher wages, which often gets passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices.
And then there's climate change, which is impacting crop yields in some areas, further driving up prices.
It's a perfect storm of factors that are making it more expensive to put food on the table.
So, what can people do? I mean, are there any practical strategies for dealing with these rising food costs?
Well, the article offers a few suggestions, like meal planning and creating shopping lists to avoid impulse buys.
That makes sense. I mean, if you know what you're going to eat for the week, you're less likely to end up with a bunch of random ingredients that go to waste.
Right. And it also helps you to take advantage of sales and discounts, which can really add up over time.
The article also talks about the benefits of buying in bulk when it makes sense, especially for staple items that you know you'll use.
And checking out local farmers markets can sometimes be a good way to get fresher produce at a lower price.
Yeah, I've definitely found that to be true. Okay, let's move on to those expenses that sometimes get overlooked, but they can really eat into your budget. Utilities and other household costs.
Right. Things like electricity, water, internet service, they're essential, but the costs just seem to keep creeping up.
I know, it's like every time I get my electricity bill, I'm shocked.
Yeah, well, energy prices are a big factor, but our consumption is also increasing as we rely more and more on electronic devices.
And don't forget about the impact of extreme weather, which can lead to higher heating and cooling costs.
Right, and with more people adopting electric vehicles, that's going to put additional strain on the power grid, which could potentially lead to even higher electricity rates in the future.
And then there's water.
Hmm.
It's becoming increasingly scarce in some areas, which is driving up costs.
And then you have the cost of maintaining and upgrading aging water infrastructure, which also gets passed on to consumers.
And let's not forget about internet service, which is basically a necessity these days.
It's not a luxury anymore.
Right. And with everyone working from home and streaming movies and video games, the demand for high-speed internet is only going to increase.
And that demand is driving up prices, especially for those who need reliable, high bandwidth connections.
So it's like, these utility costs, they may not be as dramatic as a rent increase or a huge medical bill, but they definitely add up and contribute to that overall feeling of financial strain.
Absolutely. And, this constant pressure from rising costs, it's not just affecting our bank accounts, it's also taking a toll on our mental and emotional well-being.
That's a really important point, and the article talks about this, how these financial anxieties can lead to increased stress, difficulty sleeping, and even problems with concentration.
It's like this weight that's constantly on your shoulders.
Right. And when you're constantly worried about money, it can affect your relationships, your mood, your outlook on life.
It can be really isolating too. You might feel like you're the only one struggling, but the reality is that a lot of people are going through the same thing.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And it's important to remember that you're not alone. So what can people do to try to manage this stress and anxiety that comes with these financial challenges?
Well, the article offers a few practical tips. One of the most important things is to take control of your finances, create a budget, track your spending, and try to identify areas where you can cut back.
Right. And there are a lot of great budgeting apps and tools out there that can make this process easier.
Absolutely. And then there's the idea of exploring side hustles or finding ways to generate additional income.
Like if your main income isn't keeping up with the rising cost of living, maybe you can find a part-time job or start a small business on the side.
Exactly. And then there are also community resources that people can tap into, like food banks, rental assistance programs, and financial counseling services.
Right. And sometimes just reaching out to a local community group or talking to friends and family who might be going through similar challenges can be really helpful.
It's all about finding ways to support each other and share resources.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the cost of living, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that we're dealing with this really complex and interconnected set of issues,
Hmm.
right? It's not just about inflation or housing or healthcare. It's all of these things combined.
And it's impacting people in different ways depending on their individual circumstances and where they live.
Exactly. And, we've covered a lot of ground today, and it might feel a bit overwhelming, but our goal was really to provide you with some clarity and some actionable insights.
And hopefully to encourage you to think critically about your own financial situation and the broader economic forces at play.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Given these rising costs, what fundamental shifts might be necessary either in your own personal priorities or even in our society as a whole to effectively navigate this evolving economic landscape? This is definitely something worth pondering. And as always, we really appreciate you joining us on this deep dive. Thanks for listening.